صباح الخير جميعا. Good morning. سعداء جدا بتشريفكم لنا هذا الصباح. كما سمعتم اللقاء هذا هو حول تجويد العملية التعليمية والتدريبية. أرحب بكم ترحيب كبير، أشكركم على وقتكم، على جهدكم، على تعني الحضور. أشكر كثيرا شركائنا في هذا النشاط، جامعة الأميرة نورة ومستشفى الملك عبد الله على حسن الاستضافة وعلى كرم الضيافة، وأرجو أن يستمر التعاون بيننا في المستقبل. I would like to thank our dear international speakers for coming all the way. I know one attraction was good weather, and alhamdulillah today was a good treat for you guys. I hope it stays like that. Very, very honored, very, very grateful. We have top-notch speakers from international and national institutions. أشكر المتحدثين المحليين، رؤساء اللجان والمجالس. أشكر كثيرا أخي وحبيبي الدكتور عبد الرحمن هوساوي على تنظيم هذا الملتقى، وعلى الفكرة وعلى الأداء وعلى التميز في الطرح. أشكر اللجنة العلمية برئاسة الدكتور محمد الغنيم وجميع الأخوة المنظمين المستشارين في الوكالة على هذه الجهود. هدف هذا الملتقى هو هدفين. تسمحوا لي بس أتكلم شوي بالإنجليزي. Stephen Covey always talks about the law of harvest, and unfortunately, no matter what we try to do, producing a competent healthcare worker has to go through the law of harvest. There is no shortcuts. There is nothing that we can do to speed it up or to rush it or to cook it half cooked. And part of being that is that there are so many people who are involved. And it is a very, very delicate interaction between multiple parties and different groups. And so this is the first goal of this meeting, is to try to bring everybody together on one table to discuss how can we improve the product. We are on one production line, and each one of us is holding a piece of the steak, and we want to see how can we together improve the outcome. So that's the goal number one. Goal number two is to focus on accreditation. We always focus on the curriculum, and we're sick of improving the curriculum. Sorry to say that. I'm sorry to insult some educationists in the room. We talk about exams and improving assessment all the time, and I think we've done a lot of good work in that perspective. We talk about programs, 145, all this and that. But we often neglect to talk about the thing that keeps everything together, the thing that holds everything together, the training environment itself. And so I think this meeting is about the training environment, about accreditation. We are very, very honored to have all of you. I hope you have a very good time. There is no opening ceremony. I need to apologize for starting late. There was a very major difficulty in coming into the area, and so I didn't want you to miss my speech. So thank you very much. Good morning.
نفتتح جلسات الملتقى بالجلسة الأولى بعنوان حوكمة التعليم الطبي منظور عالمي يقدمها الدكتور عارف العريبي، فليتفضل مشكورا. دكتور محمد السلطان، أوحيتكم علما أنه بإمكانكم طرح الأسئلة عبر موقع ملتقى التخصصات الطبية. The first session of the forum and the title, Governance of Graduate Medical Education is an international perspective, and will be presented by Dr. Arif Al-Arabi, Chairpersons Dr. Abdulaziz Al-Humedi and Dr. Muhammad Sultan.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I would like to welcome all of you and welcome our guest speaker. أهلا وسهلا في الجلسة الأولى لهذا الملتقى العلمي. البداية يعني متأخرين نصف ساعة، كانت الحقيقة بترتيب من الزملاء في اللجنة المنظمة، وأخذوا من وقتنا 5 دقائق، فحتى نستطيع to catch up مع السكجول يعني نستميحكم عذرا أننا نبدأ اللقاء بالمتحدث الأول. We would like to introduce the first speaker just to save the time, because they already cut 5 minutes from our time from this session. So to catch up with the schedule and to meet the end timing as we planned. So first speaker, just would like to welcome you, and you are most welcome. You would like to speak with your presentation, or yes?
If may, I introduce maybe this first speaker, Dr. Arif Al-Arabi. Arif, he is Director of Postgraduate Education, Department of Anesthesia, and this is in Western Ontario, and he is Associate Professor of the Anesthesia and Pre-Operative Medicine, also in Western Ontario. He is a member of the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada, and also he is a member of the Subspecialty Committee for Anesthesia. He is a member of the Association of Canadian University Department of Anesthesia and Chair of Internal Review Committee, the Department of Radiation Oncology. Welcome, Dr. Al-Arabi, please.
السلام عليكم. أولاً أحب أن أقول أنا سعيد جداً بوجودي بين أهلي وأخوتي في السعودية. السعودية دائماً لها مكانة خاصة عند العرب والمسلمين وعندي أنا شخصياً، وأتمنى لكم التوفيق في برنامجكم هذا. So I'll try to respect the time. I know we're a little bit late. So my talk is about the governance of graduate medical education, and I'll be talking in general, so I'll try to give you some international perspective. I'm still learning this thing, so be patient with me. So I'm going to start with this quote from Albert Einstein. He's saying information is not knowledge. So we all know there's tons of information in the internet, and we have very easy access to information, but don't think it's knowledge. So it's our job to process that raw data and frame it to be a knowledge. So today I'm giving you the information, and it's you who will go and analyze the data, analyze the information, and see if it's applicable to your environment. I'm always against the copy and paste when it comes to big projects, and especially when it comes to governments and country projects. Do I have a conflict of interest when I speak about this project? I say yes. Okay, so there are a lot of postgrad medical education programs in the world. There are a lot of good ones, but being Canadian trained and being a former program director and postgrad education, and I was honored to be involved in the CBD working group for almost the last 4 years. So I think I know the Canadian training system, and I do like the Canadian training system, and I think it's one of the best, if not the best, in the world. So my objective today, I thought I will walk you through the history of the governance of postgrad medical education, what exists now, and what are the future challenges and potential future projects that could happen also. So if we try to look at the world map and see where are the main postgrad medical education programs that are famous and known to everybody in the world, the programs that everybody look at and try to use them and borrow materials, borrow strategies, I can say confidently that these four are probably the most advanced currently. The Canadian, the American, the British, and Australian. There, if you go into the details of the structures of these ones, they're different. Everybody does things different than the other. However, the four of them, they do share. This is the common theme in them. They have very robust governance structure. And when I show you the journey through the history, you see how much they care about quality improvement, about aiming high, and making the process continuous to achieve the best in medical education. One example of how robust is the governance is the amount and number of reviews that happened in some of these countries. And probably some of you, they know the Romano report in 2002 in Canada. And I believe that there's some people who were trained in Canada during that time. And we all knew that the Canadian training system at that time was really good and producing high quality physicians. But you see there's a very bold statement there in his report that his education program should be changed. So he might have seen a few things that may not up to date or may not meet the challenges or the public interest of the governance side. Another example from the British training system, and if you're familiar with David Greenaway, who led a group of educators in the UK over a few years, and they also found very alarming findings, and they also came up with very strong recommendations. Again, I underlined there some of the bold statements they came up with, that same thing, postgrad education should be changed. Another one, there should be immediate discussion. They're using very strong words here. Immediately, things have to change. This is one of the best training programs and structures in the world. But people always aim high. They try to project in a few years where things are going, and they try to improve their education system. So it is a continuous process. So whatever structure we or you have is not a final shape. It's a process. Now, in general, what are the deciders? What controls the governance of any postgrad medical educations? Number one, whatever system exists, it should respond to any change. It shouldn't be very rigid. Always keep room for flexibility. The second, it has to be transparent. There are no secrets in the governance of medical education. And this is probably one of the ultimate goals, is to prepare medical graduates to deliver safe and effective general care in broad specialties. It has to respond to patient care. Patient care is a dynamic process, and if you look at the healthcare system over the last 100 years, it's a continuous changing environment, which makes more sense that everything controls that environment should be changing. And it has to protect the public. And that's your ultimate target, is what are you delivering to the public, all right? And it has to be consistent. The quality of medical training, whatever structures you have, they have to have the same criteria and under the same governance structure. So In Canada, we have 17 medical schools, one program per school, and they're watched very closely and carefully by the Royal College. And it has to have the QI program. So in order, somebody should watch the change and provide feedback to the stakeholders. Should I point this way or somewhere? Okay, because it's a little bit slow. So I'm going to walk you through the history, and still not working. There we go. It works this way. I found it's amazing when I was reading the history of medical education in Canada, and I think there are a lot of lessons we can learn from, and you may see some of the events and some of the projects that happened over the history applicable to your environment. So that's probably, I found this is the first probably program, medical education in Canada. It was in Montreal, although it wasn't a very formal advanced medical training program until probably 1880. You know about Osler, who's a Canadian physician who brought to us the bedside training and made a huge improvement. Some of the authors, they describe him as the father of the current medical education and training. And then probably a lot of you are familiar with the Flexner report, who did an amazing, a huge amount of work in 1910 in both Canada and the States. And he visited around 155 schools. And his report, as a result, closed about 50% of the medical schools because they didn't meet the standards. So again, the process of change is not new. It dates back to almost 100 years ago. Now, in 1912, this is the born of the Medical Council of Canada. The Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada was 1929. It's a little bit slow. Okay, 3 in a row, that's fine. So the first Royal College exam was in surgery in 1932, and then the first accreditation was almost 25 years after the establishment of the Royal College, so it is a slow process. And then the Canadian residency from hospital-based to university-based. Probably this is one of the unique and strong features of the Canadian training system, and all programs are university affiliated. And there's one, as I said, one accreditation program per university. And it made even the public perceive the medical education as it's framed within the highest education stakeholder, which is the university. So it was, I think, better perceived by the public. Still not going. In 1996, the CAN-MIDS rules, so I think most of you are familiar with the CAN-MIDS. In 2002, as we spoke about the Romano report, and which another milestone in the Canadian training programs, and his recommendations led to a lot of changes. In 2005, the first update, the CAN-MIDS, and then in 2015, the enhanced CAN-MIDS, which came as part of the preparations to the CBD, which is the competence by design, where they changed a few things in the CAN-MIDS. And in July 2017, that's the start of competency-based medical education, which is a huge change, and it has been described as probably the biggest change in medical education in 100 years. I have one slide about how the affiliation to universities made some difference in the Canadian training system. It did create a group of educators and started the base of a group of educators who can move on and be in other part of other groups who can not just look after their own small groups, but in the country who can move on to the Royal College, to their specialty committees, and provide the link. So it does provide some background and some background for the development of that group. It allowed a better interaction between the stakeholders, and it also brought research more to the medical education side, because you needed the infrastructure of the university for the research. And I think most of the people who were involved in CBME, competency-based medical education, or competency by design, they know that it will be almost impossible to do it without the help of universities. I skipped one slide, and allowed more focus on the intrinsic candidate rules, which are the non-medical expert rules: professionalism, communication, collaboration, health advocacy, scholarly, and the leader rule, to be more taught and more researched within the university frame. Now, why should we have good training systems? The answer is simple. Good factories produce good products. So this is your factory. Your postgrad medical education is the factory. So you have to make sure that this factory works well and invest as much as you can in this factory in order to have the final product, which is the resident who's graduating to a physician. Now, if we talk about the stakeholders, there's a lot of animation in this slide, and I hope it will work. If we think in a simple way that for teaching to happen, you need a trainer and a trainee. That's as simple as it gets. So I can do this here with the students. I can teach them something in a simple way. But however, we also need a learning environment around us. This environment can be small, it can be big. It depends on how much you're doing. And it's not simple. It needs tons of things to be achieved in order to have the best postgrad medical education. You need policies, you need to provide them with simple things like library, you have to have committees, there's a lot of things are needed in order for these two main stakeholders to achieve the right communication and have the right environments. These things can go loose if we don't have the right governing structures with which can keep everything around them. You need the government, you need the certification bodies, you need the university, you need the regulatory authorities. So it's a little bit more complex. Now, I'm going to make it simpler just for to better understand the medical education. So the postgrad medical education, one of the main stakeholders is the government. The second is the regulatory bodies, and I'm going to go through each one of them. The third one is the academic hospitals, the certifying bodies, the professional house staff organizations, and then the university, which is probably the core, especially in the Canadian system, which has probably three main stakeholders who run any training program. So faculty, residents, and RPC is the Residence Program Committee. Now let's start with the government, probably is the easiest one. It's either too fast or too slow. Okay. So with the government, basically, it's the bank. It's the one who provides the financial support to all the stakeholders, although there are other sources of financial support from other sources, but the government is the main one who provides the financial support. And also, the government sees the big picture. The government has the bird eye, looks at the postgraduate medical education, looks at the health sector, looks at the political landscape, everything. So they do provide different perspective when it comes to global picture. And they also have to ensure the mix of distribution of the residency positions. And over the last few years, there were a lot of shifts between residency spots in Canada according to the needs. And eventually they represent the public. Now, the second stakeholder is the professional house staff organizations. And if I say the affiliation to university is unique and to the Canadian training system, this is the second stakeholder, which is also very unique to the Canadian training system. It doesn't mean that it doesn't exist in the other training systems, but what's unique about it is it's very robust, and it's independent, and the membership is mandatory. And it really, in my experience as a program director, it does protect the residents. It provides unique vision, unique opinion when it comes to governing of medical education. And this is what we talked about. This is independent. And I'll give you one example of how strong is these associations. People who studied in Canada around 2007 and 2008, they know about the international sponsored residence salaries issue. When that's the time where the call stipends for the Canadian residents has started, where you get paid for doing calls. And then some of the international sponsored residents, they requested to have the same, which is their right. And that led the payroll, which is the main house staff organization in Ontario, to review the contracts and how much they're paid. And amazingly, they found that the salaries, they don't match the Canadian ones. And they, at the end, just to make the story short, they issued a binding arbitration to stop all the international sponsored residents by January 2008. And luckily, most of the government, they met the requirements, and nobody was sent away from their training program. But just to tell you how strong are those organizations in protecting trainees. Again, this goes under the same theme where the mandatory membership, and they protect the trainees. And there's a bigger association that protects the residents, which is the Canadian Association of Interns and Residents. But I have to say, in my experience, it's the prevention ones are the ones that do more of the work and more strong. And they do have members at the PGME committees. I sat at the university PGME committee, and there's a representative from those associations. Now, the other one is the academic hospitals. Historically, there were two groups of hospitals. One is academic, the other one is non-academic, and it was restricted, completely restricted to academic hospitals. But nowadays, it's expanded to the other sites. And they do hospitals as a stakeholder. They do have some responsibilities. One of them is they have to ensure the working conditions, that they meet the standards required for the teaching. And then the other one is they have to have, the residents spend most of their time in the hospitals. They have to make sure that the hospitals provide the right space, and they provide the services, including occupational health and other benefits. Now, the other stakeholder are the certifying bodies. So one of them is the Royal College, and this is the probably the most commonly understood. Everybody knows the role of the Royal College of Canada, and because everybody at some point in their life, they came in contact, when it comes to residents, they came in contact with the Royal College, and also the Royal College is really doing a good job in bringing its name to the national or the international level. It does set standards of training and the individual residence training programs, so they do look after the bigger picture of the training program. They don't get involved into day-to-day process and procedures. That's up to the universities and residence program committees. So there is this state of mutual trust between the Royal College and the universities and the residency program committees, which is a healthy thing to have when it comes to a complex structure. And it's the one who certifies everyone at the end. And I did underline the end, because traditionally it's known that the Royal College exam is the certifying exam. So you do your 5 years of training, or 6 or 7, and then you go to the Royal College, you do the exam, and now you're certified specialist. So this is changing now with the competency-based medical education. The exam is not certifying anymore. So the people have to come back to their training programs and prove that they're competent. So the exam is just a one checkbox towards competency. And this is the Royal College job also, to review what exists with the training program and plan for future projects. Again, it's the best example is the CBD, the competency by design. Now the second one is the Medical Council of Canada. This is parallel. It's not related to the Royal College, but these are license exams. These are the Medical Council. You do some of the licensing exams where you do the LMCC1 and LMCC2 in order to have an independent license. You don't have to do them during the training, but most people do them at the level of PGY1 and 2. And for the international medical graduates, there are 2 more exams. One is the evaluating, and the other one is the NAC-OSCE, which was introduced recently, especially in Ontario. Now, the regulatory bodies, these are the bodies that, one of them is the body that gives you the license to practice. And they make sure that you meet the requirements to be a physician. That's the best, because you could be a resident or you could be a specialist. And I just copied this from their website. You can see they mainly look at the ethical side of the practice, and they ensure that you're safe to practice medicine.
Dr. Arabi, I'll give you 1 minute more.
1 minute?
Yes.
Okay, I have a lot of slides to share.
Already exceeding the time.
Okay, I'll do my best, okay? The regulatory body, so the CMPA is another one too for protection and for medical protection. Now the universities, they have to go a little bit faster, I apologize. So universities, because at the center, they are center of the postgraduate medical education, and as I said, all residency programs has to be affiliated. And again, so it's very, very close to the PGME offices, and they have their own rule in governing and helping the residency program committees. And there's about, remember, there's 54 specialties, so that's a big group to govern. And then the educational parties of PGME, okay. And again, it has to do internal reviews to make sure that the programs, they meet the accreditation, and all programs directors are in the evaluation, so they usually get involved in those processes. And then the residents, they serve as trainees, employees, professionals, and teachers. So these are one of the main stakeholders. The faculty, this is probably, there we go. It's not very understood their role, but they do contribute to the governance of medical education as teachers, mentors, and supervisors. In Canada, it's not a paid job, so it makes them a little bit of a different stakeholder, and the representation is not huge. The RPC, again, this is, I'm just giving you an example. I will discuss this later in the other talk about the Residence Program Committee, but it's very complex. It's the headquarters of a postgraduate medical education. This is an example of my own committee, and it's a structure. I try to involve all the stakeholders, and I report to the associate dean and the chair of the department. But as we moved toward CBD, we thought we need more subcommittees, so we came up with the evaluation subcommittee, the academic curriculum subcommittee, QI, and the other one is the selection group. And also the Royal College wants us now to have a separate competence committee. And the CBD working group, this is a group that continues to work toward achieving the CBD. In terms of international perspective, I apologize for taking more time, but I really need to do this. So in terms of the four main programs, the university involvement is, as said, unique and high to the Canadian training system. It's very variable in the USA. They have other community hospitals that can be accredited. In UK, it's minimal, and the Royal College and the GMC, they have regional deans and lead deans who look after the training. The source of curriculum, they're all the same. There's one body controls all the curriculums. And these two usually go together. If you give a curriculum, you have to make sure it's delivered. So the accreditation is same bodies in the 4 countries. And then the training evaluation certification is a little bit different, but the ultimate goal is the same. So you have specialty certification and license exams. And then the resident representations, which I said is a little bit different, and probably the Canadian training system is more strong. So I'm just going to have a few slides about what's new. If we think the residents are the ultimate product of this system, everybody wants to produce a good residence, and eventually we serve the public. And as we saw, that these two reports gave us some alarms and red flags. There was a need to make big changes. Probably you've seen this as in the States, that medical errors are the 3rd common cause of death. Despite the good training systems, we still see medical errors, and these are the only ones that reported. This number can be higher. And then in the 2010, the GMC in UK that surveyed the freshly graduated physicians, and they found that 10% that they don't feel, 1 in 10 doesn't feel that they're competent. And there's almost 90% of the disciplinary actions are related to professionalism. We all know about fail to fail in medical education and how it's a big problem there. So the other one is our focus now on finished rotations and do pass exams. The focus is not mainly on competency. Who should drive the training? I think you all agree. Now it's time. They're adult learners. They should drive their own training. And this can be very complex, as in UK, this number of competencies will be almost impossible to achieve in 5 or 6 years of training. And this is from Greenaway report. And then we need to connect all the dots. It should be a continuous process between the undergrad, postgrad, and till retirement. And that's why the Canadian changes with the CBD. So I'm not going to go on this in detail, but it's a major change. I give it there as an example of how strong is the governance and how robust and how they can make big changes if they work together. So I may skip the summary, I think. Basically just repeating a few things that were said. And this is a summary of the possible communication between the different stakeholders. So the residents, the resident program committee, the postgrad medical education committee, the university, the faculty. This is how the Royal College contacts. And then the professional house staff organization, they protect the residents. The licensing bodies, they work more with the university, faculty, and resident. And then the hospitals, the government. Main interaction is with university and hospitals. I end my presentation with this quote by Dan Millman, that if you are building a new thing, do not fight the old. Just to go ahead, focus on your future, look at the good side of things, and continue your work. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Al-Arabi. I will take maybe a few minutes for questions. So if there is any question, please raise your hand so that the mic will come to you.
شكرا للدكتور عارف العريبي وندعو رؤساء الجلسة لمناقشة الجلسة. Thanks, Dr. Arif Al-Arabi. We're kindly asking the chairperson to discuss the session.
I couldn't hear.
We cannot hear you here.
Was there a question?
There is somebody there at the top there. If can you, one of those guys who has the mic? At the top. At the top, folk. Please introduce your name and your specialty.
Hi, good morning everyone. I'm Dr. German, I'm Program Director in Family Medicine. Thank you, Dr. Arif, for your presentation today. But just I need your suggestion. In our setting here, in our country, we have different governmental hospital, whether military or non-military, and they can house any program. So you talked about the governance structure. So it's not unique all over the hospital. So what's your suggestion in this matter to go forward?
I'm just going to repeat the question, just make sure that I understood the question. So you said here in Saudi Arabia that the structure involves both academic hospitals and non-academic hospitals. And you're asking which is better, or how the governance structure can be in this situation. Am I right?
Yeah, how can we make it a unique, standardized? Because every hospital can house any program, whether academic or not.
Yeah. I might go back to the first few slides in my presentation. I did mention that I only explained the Canadian system, but there are other systems in the world that do things different, and they all work. So it doesn't mean that if the Canadian system doesn't allow non-academic or community hospitals to be separate and have their own training programs, it doesn't mean that it's the only right thing. So I know in the United States, they have this similar setup that you have now. So, and it works well. The GMC accredit all those sites. And there's so many things to say I couldn't say because of the time, but it does, the one advantage of this system, it provides two different streams of graduates. One of them is the community, the clinicians who can provide service to the public, whereas the academic can provide people with educational interest and academic interests. So the government, I think, it depends on the plan, can work on both. So I do like that all the systems, all the training programs affiliated to universities, because of what I said, especially in the Canadian training system, we do pay attention to the intrinsic can-mids, which are really hard to teach probably in a community hospital. So things like professionalism, collaboration, even the scholarly side, which is the research side, can be a little bit hard because you need the university infrastructure to achieve those ones.
Okay.
More questions?
We have a question here.
The ladies' side.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Dr. Arif. This is Dr. Wadha Al-Utaybi, Program Director for Pediatric Pulmonology Fellowship. Really, I enjoy your lectures, but I have one question. You put one of the slides for the evaluation, I think, GMC, and you compare Canada with USA and with also UK, and you put the high in the Canada, and you mentioned it is satisfactory or acceptable in USA and also minimal in UK and Australia. Do you have a metric or you have a standard for that to put this evaluation so we can in the Saudi Commission here to implement it for our program? Or it is depend on the governmental, because you know sometimes if you ask when we go training outside, we can say the residency here in Saudi Commission, it is the best in compared to the other outside. We do want our personal conflict to relay that one. But if you have the standard, we would like to know it, and so we can give the benefit to implement it in our center or in the Saudi Commission. Thank you again.
I really couldn't understand the question.
Okay, one of your slides, if you can go back, you will find you compare Canada, USA, UK, Australia. If you go back to your slide, and you put the top of that is Canada. You mentioned it is very high in the standard. You mentioned in Australia and UK, it was the minimal. Can you go
yes,
back?
I think now I know what you mean.
Yes.
The first one of the slide,
Yes.
the first part of the comparison is the university affiliation.
Yeah.
And how it's high in Canada and it's less in the other countries, right?
Yeah.
So, and your question is
How they make this one, or based on what?
how?
What is their standard to make it? Is this very high inflation in compared to the other?
Oh, you mean there's some written standards? Is that?
Yes.
Okay. I think this probably goes with the vision of the big stakeholders. So if the country, if you look at the government, the Royal College, the universities, and what they would like, and based on the needs, which if at the education level would be the can-mids, which are the backbone of the Canadian training system, and the public needs. And according to those reports I mentioned, there were a few gaps when it comes to the intrinsic can-mids. And as I said, especially professionalism, and 90% of the lawsuits is because of professionalism. So I'm not aware of standards that decided, written standards that decided that the university, or decides how the university or how every training program should be affiliated to university. But again, I think...
Who was the stakeholder for that?
That again, please?
Well, who's the stakeholder to make this one? It was in Canada?
There's a lot of echo for here, so I can't...
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't understand the last question.
It is the same. I'm asking who is the stakeholder for it?
Stakeholders.
The stakeholders? Okay. So I think I talked about the stakeholders, and in terms of the university, it's one of the stakeholders. So it's probably the center of the medical education in Canada, as I said, and it does have some other big stakeholders like the RPC, the faculty, and the residents, the resident program committee and resident faculty, and it does work closely with the Royal College. So in order to have the strong university, then you need to have better communications with all parties. You can't just separate. We can't just have one stakeholder that runs all the show. So it's the government, the regulatory bodies, the licensing body, the groups that protect the residents. So you need all stakeholders to achieve this.
Thank you, Dr. Arabi. I think we have to move for the sake of time. Thank you very much. So we'll move to the second speaker, Dr. Hussein Al-Hussein. I was told it will show on the screen the bibliography of the speaker, but Dr. Hussein Al-Hussein, he's a radiation oncologist. We worked together at King Fahad Medical City. He is specialized in head and neck, and he is the director of the postgrad over there for a while. So he will give us a talk about accreditation system for CME in Saudi Arabia. Dr. Hussein.
Thank you so much, Dr. Aziz. And it's indeed a pleasure and an honor to be among this elite group who is handling the postgraduate medical education in Saudi Arabia. And I am pleased to spend the next 45 minutes with you discussing challenges and the roadmap for postgraduate medical education in Saudi Arabia. I am a consultant radiation oncologist subspecialized in head and neck and CNS stereotactic radiosurgery and affiliated with the Saudi Commission for Health Specialties as a consultant of accreditation affairs. And I am pleased to go with you through this session. It's going to be quite a short presentation to prime the discussion. Then we're going to go through hearing from you and getting to get through this maximum using the wide expertise of this audience. And actually, just wanted to provide some statistics of the participants in this forum today. As of Thursday, there had been almost 969 participants who have registered at this forum, whether it is in Riyadh, which is happening today, or in Dammam on Tuesday, or in Jeddah on Thursday. 30% of the participants are program directors. 23% of them are the Saudi Commission surveyors who go and accredit, do the survey visits to assess the suitability of the training programs for accreditation, and 17% of them are program coordinators. And there is academic affairs, leadership of universities who are in charge of training, postgraduate medical training, and scientific committees and councils, chairmen and representatives. So in a nutshell, the Saudi Commission accredits training centers and programs utilizing all the potentials to serve training purposes. The Saudi Commission accreditation looked at ensuring effective participation of the qualified consultants and specialists in the training process. And it does so by ensuring creating an appropriate learning environment for trainees based on postgraduate medical education, best practices, and evidence. And the ultimate goal is to provide the trainees with the highest quality training that qualify them to practice safely in their respective specialty. So we're going to go through 2 more slides, and that is about it for the presentation. We are going to have the next slide looking at the challenges of the present status of the accreditation and postgraduate medical education in Saudi Arabia. Then the next slide, we're going to go through where the Saudi Commission is moving forward from here to the next milestone. My apologies for the delay in response to. Super. So one of the things that we would like to hear from you later on following this presentation is about the process of accreditation here in Saudi Arabia for postgraduate medical education. We realize and we are aware of the process of accreditation in Saudi Arabia for training programs, as you have been observing. There had been some issues in regards to the slowness of the process. And the process had been lengthy, and we are aware and conscious of that there are multiple steps in the process of accreditation that could be revised, whether it is to be eliminated if it does not affect the quality of the accreditation, or be modified or optimized to ensure that the process is as seamless as possible. The tools. We are revising the multiple applications that we are using with the Commission while we are conducting the accreditation. One of them is the accreditation standards. What are the accreditation standards that we are following, and how much we are doing compared to the international benchmarks? What is our status compared to that? And that is one issue that we would like to have further discussion about when we are moving along with this session today morning. The accreditation standards, as we have just discussed, and we're going to come back to this shortly. The surveyors, we do have a challenge of recruiting surveyors in general, and we do have a challenge of having surveyors who are committed to perform the survey process to the highest standard. We have been very fortunate to have a large group of surveyors who are able to dedicate some of their time to be able to perform the survey process to the highest quality, and we are aiming to further optimize their performance and their ability to dedicate some of their time to the surveying process. And the accreditation manpower. Our accreditation administration staff are, in general, going through multiple levels of accreditations, and in addition to multiple specialties of accreditation. As Dr. Arif had presented, the Canadian Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada is concerned of training, postgraduate training related to physicians and surgeons. And the same for the family physician, Canadian College of Family Physician. But when we come to the Saudi Commission for Health Specialties, we are looking for all disciplines related to healthcare, where this adds a huge kind of a burden toward any single administrative staff to be able to handle all these disciplines. And that had been an issue had been identified, where there are these small details here and there are very hard to be handled by one administrative staff to be able to address all these multiple disciplines. And that is an area for improvement, and we're going to come through what is the plan toward that. Management of volume. We are been identifying, I'm just going to give an example, a very quick example. In the later part of 2017, there have been over 400 training programs that are pending for review, that the review had not been done, whether it is closer to the end of the accreditation process, whether it is passed or have been closer to pass the accreditation deadline and have not been reviewed. And that had been a large volume. And one of the challenges related to that is there is multiple last-minute requests to push through accreditation training programs in order to start a program to be able to start in a very short amount of time. And that had been resulting into an aggregation and a piling of programs that are to be reviewed and delaying the process of re-accrediting programs that are already being approved. But there had been a great work being done by our colleagues, and as by December and January, this logbook, or actually that pile, have been down almost to zero. which had required a huge amount of effort to be able to achieve that. And we would like not to come back to this back again, and we'd like to come back to where we are going from this. On the next slide. And we are very conscious and aware of the lack of performance indicators and actually performance management and measurement indicators. But the Saudi Commission is working actively at the moment to try to build up on that and to be able to have a dashboard where we are able to know at every given point where are we in compared to what we are expected to be, and be able to follow that dashboard and know where is the process when it comes to accreditation or other milestones, and integrate this with other parts of postgraduate training here in Saudi Arabia. The follow-up on accreditation, we do have 4 years accreditation period, where that period of 4 years, the training programs that are accredited by the Saudi Commission are on their own, and that is a period that we need to ensure that the maintenance of the accreditation standards during that 4 years are not being lost, and we are able to ensure that there are, at any given point of time, if you do a cross-sectional anatomy of the situation in the training centers, that you would be able to have an identical or close to an identical process of where you did have the survey or the status when you are coming next for the next survey visit. So that follow-up mechanism is being addressed to try to optimize the gap or the period between one accreditation visit to the next. And at the moment, that is a gap, and we are very conscious of that, and we are working along to get that addressed. Communication. As you are all aware, the program directors, scientific committee, councils, and committees, and training centers, academic affairs, whether universities or in the hospitals, there is an issue of the communication that we do have. It's mostly based on individual communications. That is one area that we're going to come to the next slide. Where is that gap to be addressed? And how can we address that gap? And what is the plan of the Saudi Commission to be able to have that gap addressed? And as we have mentioned before, the eventual, which is the maintenance of accreditation status for any training program that gets accredited. And coming last but not least, the complaint and appeal management mechanism that we do have. We are aware of your challenges whenever you had an issue that has to be addressed, or whether to appeal to a certain accreditation standards. What is the process? What is the mechanism? What is the system to follow in order to initiate a complaint or an appeal and to follow up that until it is all addressed? And we are conscious and aware that this is a gap here that Saudi Commission. Most of us, or actually most of you, would have to communicate through multiple levels of the Saudi Commission in order to reach to have your complaint followed up or your appeal followed up. And some of you would have to go all the way to the highest hierarchy of the organization in order to reach that, and which will add an additional pile of tasks to the leadership of the Saudi Commission. Or where are we to focus on? That thing can be seriously bridged when we do have an effective complaint and an appeal management system, where people would be able to trust the system that when I initiate a complaint or an appeal to the accreditation status, I'm going to be able to follow up that all the way until I get my appeal or complaint addressed. And that is, with time, it's going to build the confidence into where we are with our complaints, rather than bridging to the leadership of the institution in order to reach to the situation where our appeal or complaint is being addressed to the best of our ability. And that being said, we're going to go to the next slide. And before I start the next slide, I just wanted to mention one thing. While I was observing Dr. Arif's presentation, talking about the Canadian Royal College, which is reaching almost to 100 years. or almost 80 plus years of operation. The Saudi Commission for Health Specialties is 25 years old and have been initiated by a huge effort and commitment by our senior colleagues who have done a great job to start from nothing all the way to where we are right now. Where is the Saudi Commission right now? I'm very confident that most of us see the Saudi Commission in the region as one of the leading organizations when it comes to governance of graduate medical education in the region. When I say in the region, in Saudi Arabia, in the Gulf region, and in the Middle East. We are seeing that, and we are aware of that that's not our goal. Our goal is to become one of the benchmarks to reach to that slide where Dr. Arif have put the countries where postgraduate medical education is located, where the highest qualities of postgraduate education. That is where the hope of the Saudi Commission. And if you have observed for the last period of time, the Saudi Commission is moving toward that and trying to do every single possible effort to reach to that. And hopefully one day, very soon, that we will be on that map that Dr. Arif is presenting. So would like to thank every single one who have participated for the last 25 years. That 25 years is not a very long period of time to build such a high quality organization. Yes, we do have lots of gaps. Yes, we do have lots of imperfections, but that is where it is in your pathway to perfection or trying to get to the highest quality. Perfection might not be possible, but the highest quality possible with a clear road to reach to that. So for the next 2 minutes or 1.5 minutes, I'm just going to address the roadmap to reach to that area. So we are having an extensive revision of the process, trying to eliminate the waste, because we are aware that there is a waste. There are some processes that has to be eliminated, some of them that are not affecting the eventual outcome and probably just delaying the process and adding to the utilization of the existing resources, whether it is time or manpower or money. And automating that process once we reach to the best possible process, to automate it so that we reduce the intervention of individuals into that process. And optimizing the accreditation standards. Seriously, don't know, it's moving by, okay, let's try again. Optimizing the accreditation standards, and I have one more slide to show before we conclude the presentation. And enhancing the surveyors' skills. The surveyors are already performing to the best of their ability, but that's not enough. We would like to ensure that every single surveyor have exactly the same set of skills, competencies, and capability to conduct a survey as A, as B, as C. So we don't want that variation of the performance of the surveyors. And part of that step is at 11:15 today, we are starting the surveyors workshop, which is only one part of the equipment to try to equip the surveyors to the best of their ability to perform and do their job in a very consistent manner rather than being variable between one to the other. Thank you. I'm not going to be too long. And the accreditation manpower, where the Saudi Commission is looking to have dedicated teams for every single discipline: medical, surgical, dental, allied health, nursing, and others, so that that team would be fully competent of the specific details when it comes to accreditation of that discipline. Performance measurement, we're already initiating that, and that is some huge step where we would like to know on a dashboard that Dr. Abdurrahman Hausawi or Dr. Ayman Abdu or any one of the executives or chairpersons of scientific committees or any individual academic affairs administrator would be able to come through that dashboard and know where we are doing compared to where we are supposed to be doing. And that should be a real-time and very accurate when you do a cross-sectional review. The reward system for the surveyors and for the involved individuals into the accreditation process, where we are starting a specific reward system for the surveyors and ranking them from bronze, silver, and gold, and with a specific reward system in order to be able to build up on that and have developed the criteria into it, and which is being initiated into the approval process. Effective accreditation maintenance system rather than the system that is mostly based on individuals following up on things and to making sure, for example, general surgery program in the military hospital accreditation had been expired in January, and we are now in March or in February or in June, and we are, unless someone goes and check on that, it would pass probably weeks or months before that being reviewed. So we would like to, or actually we are in the process to have the digital transformation system where all that should be automated, and there is a red flags and alarm system that will be initiating alarms with an escalation matter where that has to be addressed. In addition to an effective communication tools where emails, phone calls, and other follow-up tools that are done are to be eliminated, where it should be a very automated system with a specific escalation process, and the admission and the submission of the survey reports are not to be done by emails or filling up the Word files or having to fill Excel sheets. All that has to be automated, and you submit it on an online platform. In addition to the autonomy of those training centers that are accredited, to ensure that they are equipped with the support to be able to ensure that they are in a compliance with accreditation standards during the period from one accreditation visit to the next. And being able to have a self-initiated red flags or red flags by the trainees or trainers to ensure that whenever there is a violation or deviation of these accreditation standards, these are addressed. In addition to an effective complaint appeal management system that is very transparent and very visible and very accurate, and you don't need to make phone calls in order to have your complaint or appeal followed upon, where that has to be very clearly visible when a complaint is reaching to the next, and you'll be able to follow up on it and know where it is, and have the ones who are in charge of each single team are aware where that complaint is going with a specific escalation system if there is any delays in the response. And without any further ado, I'm having this slide just to summarize, in a nutshell, a recent project that had been done to review the accreditation standards of the Saudi Commission and to see how much we are doing in comparison with the international benchmark. And there had been, the Canadian Royal College had been identified as an international benchmark for the medical training programs and the dental training programs, the American accreditation system, and for the pharmacy and for nursing, the UK system, and so on and so forth. So we had reviewed how much we are doing compared to the international benchmark. So this project had been done by external reviewers, yet they are not affiliated with the Saudi Commission as administration staff or consultants. They're done by those reviewers from Saudi Arabia who are either program directors or surveyors or academic affairs staff and so on and so forth, or consultants who are just practicing, that had been looking into the accreditation standard of 66 training program and seeing how much of that compared to the international benchmark. And in this table, it just shows you the total overall matching of the international benchmark of almost 88%. But we know that we are having some deficiencies in certain areas. For example, if you look at the resources, our accreditation standards, when it is looking at the resources, are ranging between 44% to 100% with an average of 78%. That's a clear area for improvement where we are working actively with the scientific committees and council to look at the accreditation standards of these programs that are below 90% matching with the international benchmark and trying to optimize that and ensure that this gap is being bridged. And from this slide, it shows you that 100% is there for every single core area, every single one of the 6 cores. And 100% had been actually, or closer to 100%, have been achieved by multiple training programs that have had an accurate and actually accreditation standards that are matching to over 90% or 95% the international benchmark. And I would like to acknowledge the team members who have been involved into that project, and they are going to be our gear and our support to proceed with this project to ensure when we come back in the end of 2018, these accreditation standards are going to be optimized to over 90%. And there had been 15 programs that have not met the eligibility criteria to be reviewed, and they are on our radar to ensure that that is being included. So the next time when we come back, we are going to be having 81 programs to review. And these 15 programs that were not eligible, where most of them have been recently initiated, so they were not eligible to be included into that review process. And this is just a slide of the challenges and the roadmap and for the discussion so that we can access it and come through it back and forth during the discussion. Thank you so much, and looking forward to hearing from you and learning from you, this elite group. I'm very confident that you might help us to identify other challenges and that will put them under our radar when we are trying to take it through the roadmap to make our accreditation system a better one, and being on the map that Dr. Arif has mentioned in a very soon time. That is the goal of the Saudi Commission. And have you seen over the last years, Saudi Commission is a dynamic organization. And I have been able to identify this for the past 1 year, and I have been able to see that it is not a rigid system. It is a dynamic, and I have seen over a short period of time, huge amount of steps and actually cutting through and running through to ensure that the next milestone is achieved. And we are only 25 years old, and we are confident that we are going to be in that map very soon, inshallah. Thank you so much, everyone, and looking forward to hear you.
Thanks, Dr. Hussein Al-Hussein. We're kindly asking the chairperson to discuss the session.
شكرا دكتور حسين, and it was nice to hear that very constructive, clear roadmap for the whole process. For the time constraint, we'll limit the question for one question, and Dr. Hussein and other speaker will be around, so you can ask them anytime during the coffee break or the break time. So we can receive one question before we introduce the third speaker. Dr. عمر اليحيى, تفضل. في microphone, please.
Assalamu alaikum. Umar al-Yahya al-Qasim, family physician. Thank you, Dr. Hussein. This is a very concise presentation. Thank you. I believe accreditation is a tool by itself. It's not, the same as certification of the individual. The problem that I noticed here, that one of the challenges you put nicely is the follow-up. I think I have a problem in my organization myself, in the follow-up. Certification or accreditation became objective by itself now. So is it an international problem? Is it a problem in our culture? We want just to hang the accreditation in our organization or to put it in the CV or whatever sort of. The problem in the follow-up post-accreditation.
Thank you so much. Would you mind, Lee, just, I have an issue of hearing that question. Could you kind of just summarize that question, please? Thank you so much.
The problem in the post-accreditation status, post-accreditation quality of the organization, whether service or training or whatever. So everybody was preparing for the accreditation. Once the accreditation happens, the things will drop.
Thank you so much. That is exactly the core of the maintenance of accreditation part of the roadmap of the Saudi Commission. We are conscious and aware that this is a gap. And seriously, this is one of the most serious gaps in any accreditation system, is that you come across do a cross-sectional review at the time of the scheduled accreditation, and you have a certain result. You come back next day or next week or a month or a year later or 2 years later, and you do a cross-sectional review, and eventually you are shocked with what's happening. This is not only in the postgraduate medical education, this is happening, unfortunately, on most levels. In healthcare is a complex industry system, so let's focus about the Saudi Commission when we come here. So the training centers that are accredited by the Saudi Commission, when they are fully aware that if they receive the accreditation certification for that period of 4 years, if they are aware that these are only a step toward maintenance of the certification or the accreditation, they would work hardly to ensure that these accreditation standards are met all the way through the 4 years of gap. Without us being able to do random visits and random checks and having that being clearly identified that this is not something that is just happening by chance. This is something that you are expected to know, that once you are accredited, you are to be expecting a visit that is arranged within a short notice, that even if it does not have to be notified at all, that is where you can have that accreditation situation identified. But that's, when we come to the practicality of that, that might not be as practical as we are. When we looked at the red flags, having red flags clearly identified within the system, within the accreditation system, and having the trainees, trainers, and academic affairs being able to red flag and identify issues, that does not mean that there will be an abrupt decision or visit to go and there and revoke the accreditation standard. No, but when people are aware that there are red flags, there are things that are actually can be identified, whether initiated by the trainees or the trainers, or initiated by the administration, that can be taken seriously in a very systematic manner, in a very clear flow of process to ensure that that red flag is addressed. Rather than that red flag goes and you send an email, people are just going to be panicking through that email or panicking through that phone call, then within a few days or weeks, people will forget about that and things are going to be addressed or kind of internally solved as if nothing have happened. No, we'd like to make sure that the root cause of every single red flag is being identified and is being addressed, because without addressing the root causes, you're going to be just having red flags right and left, and you're not going to be able to have very smooth process. So that red flag system and system of follow-up and maintenance and the random reviews is the way to ensure that these 4 years are not left without being checked.
Thank you, Dr. Hussein. As we said, we have Dr. Hussein the whole day with us, and even in Dammam and in the Khubar and Jeddah. So he will be available and other speakers also available to answer your questions. Now I would like to introduce the third speaker, our honored guest, Dr. Kevin Weiss. He's most welcome. I was told also a brief introductory for Dr. Kevin Weiss will be written on the screen. So I hope you didn't change your mind this time also. So good, that's great.
انتهت الجلسة الثانية. الجلسة الثالثة والأخيرة بعنوان عملية الاعتماد كدافع للتطوير المستمر لجودة التعليم الطبي العالي، ويقدمها البروفيسور كيفن ويس، فليتفضل مشكورا. The second session is finished. Now the third last session will start and entitled Accreditation as the driver for continuous improvement in graduate medical education, and will be presented by Professor Kevin West.
He's saying good things about you in Arabic. Okay? Yeah. Just trust me. Trust me, he's saying good things about you in Arabic. Yeah.
Well, good morning and salam alaikum. You've heard two excellent presentations that have gotten us into the framing, governance, and look at the accreditation system that you're building, which sounds quite exciting to me, who've been working in this world. It's a good time in this morning session to reflect for just a moment what may seem obvious as we think about accreditation. And I want to do it by way of two pictures. My guess is many, if not all of you, woke up this morning, went through your morning rituals and had breakfast, enjoyed your family, maybe took your children to school, and prepared for your day. Your usual day would be that in helping care for people who need our help as caregivers. And that's what your joy and love is, family, and the care that you provide. And you've chosen, as I've been blessed to have chosen, a field where you can bring all that together every day in your professional life. And here we are talking about accreditation. And how does that come together? We're sitting here spending time in our precious lives thinking about what it means to do this regulatory function over ourselves as a profession. And I really have to, in my life, sum it up in these two pictures. The first is every day I come in to my professional life thinking about patients and the care that we need to give. And the second is to think about the next generation. Because as you, as physicians and other healthcare providers, have chosen not to just to do healthcare, but you've chosen the most noblest of parts of the profession, and that is to create the generational change. You're the educators. So not only doing the care, but assuring that the next generation is able to do even better care than you can. And that's what accreditation is about. So as I go through the rest of my brief presentation, I'll come back to this a couple of moments along the way, because if we lose sight of this in accreditation, then accreditation feels almost officious and almost distant from us. It's really a system to support how we make these two things happen, patient care and this very treasured thing that we do, which is help bring the next generation forward. I'm going to take you through it in a story through the U.S. Because I know that best. I'm not going to speak a lot to the U.S. accreditation system. We actually have a wonderful person, Dr. Susan Day from our organization, and particularly from ACGM International, who later today will take you a little bit further into that. But let's take you a little bit into the U.S. health system to remind ourselves of why accreditation is so important. And this is the late 1990s, where we started seeing newspaper reports of deaths caused by healthcare system failures. These were individuals who made it into very national prominence because they died because of problems in our healthcare system. That led to a study by our most august body, at the time called the Institute of Medicine, now called the National Academy of Medicine, to say we have a system that is perhaps through medical errors harming and maybe even killing between 50 to 100,000 people a year. And you saw that slide from Professor Arif in the first, which puts medical errors very high up above many of the cancers that we consider important in terms of patient care. Just so you know that it doesn't feel like it's always about the U.S., what we see is, even to this day, around the world, as people begin to look at our healthcare systems, they see these problems that we saw in the U.S. and are continuing to see. And it represents the fact that this is where we need to focus. We need to continually focus on how to improve the quality of care we're giving. And of course, those of us in the room have a very special and essential piece, because we not only have to do the care, but we have to teach how to do better care to those coming through the process. And accreditation tries to help shape that process. Now, what you would not necessarily have seen from the U.S. is a very other important line of investigation that came out around the same time as those errors I talked about, led by a seminal piece of work by Jack Wenberg. looking at variability in healthcare from place to place, from one hospital to the next, to the next, to the next. He looked in a state of Vermont, one of our states that have a few million people in it, and he showed that healthcare would look very different if you went to a hospital in one city versus another. And that what explained that difference is not the disease within the population, but the number and the types of doctors who are providing the care, suggesting that it was doctor variability, very specifically supply side, that was actually creating the quality differences that he was seeing. So he put this together with that other movement in patient safety, and we said we needed to look at how we can make our care better, along with other articles that came out. This is in the New England Journal, where they looked at primary care offices across the entire United States, not just in Vermont, but across the entire United States, and saw when they looked at care, and they looked at preventative care, acute care, chronic care, and you rolled it all up into a number. The average physician, when they encountered a patient, was getting care correctly 54% of the time. I'll repeat that. They were getting care correctly 54% of the time. And I see a few of you shaking your heads saying this is terrible, and I think we would all say this is not good. This is not good for one of the places who is in the U.S., we're supposed to be delivering some of the best care in the world, and we're very privileged to have a system that can actually support good care. We just needed to do it better. That turns into another report by the National Academy of Medicine. I had the privilege of being part of this particular committee, which said we have to rethink the way that we do healthcare, and part of that is we have to rethink how we educate and train our health professions. And of course, that leads to rethinking accreditation. Just so you know that that work that I just showed you, which was in just around the turn of the last century, that feels a long time ago, about year 2000, this is an article I just picked up in 2015 in surgery, showing that same variation that Jack Wenberg showed almost 20, 30 years ago still occurs. And in fact, anywhere in the world that we look for this variation in care, we see it, and it's very much attributable not necessarily to the disease process, but to the care provided in that particular population. So here we are in medical education, and we take individuals from medical school, we take them through their first physical diagnosis, we put them through their clerkships, we then work our way slowly but surely to where they can practice independently. You help them. We all, as teachers, help them get there. And we put them through this thing in the United States we call residency and fellowship. More broadly around the world, we call it postgraduate medical education. And somehow in those boxes, we have to go from when they can function totally dependent on our knowledge to becoming independent and eventually the teachers and educators that we are in this room. How do we do that well, and how do we assure that? That is the accreditation process that we're trying to work on. So, do we need to do this? Well, here's some work done by a wonderful individual by the name of David Ash. This is one, I think, of the seminal articles that I rest on, and I encourage you to pull it if you'd like. It looked at obstetrical care, and what he said with his colleagues is, does where you train affect how well you do in terms of adverse outcomes? And he looked at maternal outcomes in this particular study. That if you trained at a place that had lower maternal outcomes that were bad, what happened 20 years later in practice? What happened 10 years later in practice? And he found a direct correlation between if you trained at a hospital that had lower mortality and other complications for birth, that 10 years later you also had, wherever you landed, in practice, not at the same hospital, anywhere else in the United States that you landed, you would end up having lower complications. So your training came with you. And it wasn't just the training, because they didn't look at the program, they looked at the hospital. That environment went with you as well. And it didn't account for a small piece. It accounted for 33% of the excess risk. 1/3 of the excess risk of a maternal adverse outcome was associated with the environment in which you trained, which says we need to look at the environment and we need to try and do everything we can as educators, as part of our physician role, as healthcare providers, to try and stabilize and improve the variability there. Oh, let me back up one. Just so you know that that's not a U.S. phenomenon, this publication came out just 2 months ago in Academic Medicine, and it's from the Netherlands, where they looked not at the maternal side of the equation that Dr. Ash and his colleagues looked at, but they looked at the pediatric outcome, the child, the APGAR scores. Same general findings. The environment that you train in shapes the care that you're going to give, not just the teacher, the mentor trainee, which is essential, but the environment that Arif did such a beautiful job of shaping for us in his first presentation. Does teaching hospitals improve care? Well, this is a nice article that came out, I think, also sometime mid-2017 in the Journal of the American Medical Association. Another good article to take a look at, which reminds us that if you have a hospital, whether it's community or academic university hospital, your care improves because it's associated in some way with that training, which speaks to the important part of how training does something important, not just for the trainee, but for the care in that institution. Once again, bringing the issue of how we can improve that through standardization. So now let's take the next layer of journey of saying, okay, we know that we need to look at the care process through the eyes of the learner. We need to create that competent learner, and how do we structure that? Well, there's no one structure, and we are getting a feel for that. This is the U.S. structure of competencies. You may know it. If you're not, I'll just say there are 6 of them. The patient care and technical skills we know so well. Medical knowledge we also know well. Those top 2 are the ones that we spend most of our time in training, and over the past 100 or plus years in modern medicine have been working on those 2 competencies. But notice there's some other competencies that are important, and we've talked about them as practice-based learning, improvement, interpersonal and communication skills, professionalism, and system-based practice. I'm not going to go into the details of them, but it says that there are things in addition to just technical knowledge and the specialty that are essential in the U.S. competencies. We see them similarly in other competencies. Here's CanMeds, who do a beautiful job of how they've developed their competencies. You could easily crosswalk the 2, what I just showed you before, to the medical expert model of CanMeds. And there are other great models around the world worth looking at. We haven't figured out the best, but that's not important. What we're finding out are really solid models that work, and we just have to work with them. We're beginning to start to structure an international dialogue on what good standards are. And here's the World Federation with me, World Federation for Medical Education, who's primarily focused on undergraduate medical education, the medical schools. But they, in 2015, produced this document, which was an update of a prior, much smaller document that's beginning to talk about what might be global standards that we should be looking at. And it has some of the basic structures that we see in those competency-based looks that I showed you on the prior slide. So we're beginning to move forward as a global conversation on what standards should be for postgraduate education. Now, here you are, at least in one little snippet of a slide that I would like to highlight, that you're in a place where you want to rapidly grow the health workforce needs, particularly the physician needs of your country. And you're going to have to do it in ways that you haven't thought about before, because of capacity building means that you have to both increase the quality and the quantity at the same time. And that's a challenge. And the only way you can do that is through accreditation. And accreditation has to not serve as a regulatory constraint, but actually an improvement process. Because if you constrain a process that you have to grow, it doesn't grow right. So you have to figure that delicate balance of saying we're putting enough rules in place, we call those standards, that they begin to help shape what it is that we want to train our residents, this next generation, to, without dampening the ability to grow and do this well. Not an easy walk. Some thoughts on this. First, we have to go back and say, when we build these standards, what does it do for patient care? Remember that first of 2 pictures I showed you? The patient, that's what we're here for. The physician that we're training is serving the needs of that patient care. So every time we think about a new standard, a new thing that we say you must do, we have to ask, how does that translate first into how is that going to benefit our patients in the complex healthcare systems they have to go through? And then second, not less than, but second, is how does it actually improve the quality of the learning that that trainee has? Now, that's the educational needs. What does it look like for accreditation needs to make those two things work? The first is assuring higher quality and safer care and accountability in GME, which means that we need to look for metrics and in those standards that say, by doing these accreditation activities, we're improving care. The same way I showed you those few articles we're starting to see come out of the United States, we wouldn't expect any accreditation system to be doing that kind of work to see are these having graduate medical education and lifting the care process. And then the second is to make sure that you're seeing that these standards actually raise the quality of medical education. And that's much more in the wheelhouse of many of us in the room who are medical educators, to make sure that the trainees are actually getting that improvement towards independent practice, getting those competencies and measuring what that looks like. So with that in mind, there's some insights we can take here. First of all, this is getting global attention. It's not just something we're needing and seeing in the United States. It's something that not you're just seeing in Saudi Arabia. It's a global issue seen, and what it says is we don't have enough health workforce to meet the needs of our changing populations, particularly as the demographics move from acute illness to chronic illness, more diabetes in the world, more issues around smoking and smoking-related illness, heart disease, the more complex medical care needs, the more expensive health care choices we have to make with our patients because medicines are, with the biologics are getting very expensive, and how do you go through those kind of choices? So we need a better and stronger workforce, and through this global strategy, milestone 1.1 is all countries will establish accreditation mechanisms for health training institutions. It's a journey that we're all on now together. So, with that in mind, and 2 minutes on the clock, I have, I believe, 1 or 2 thoughts to give to finalize. Accreditation activities need to be based on continuous improvement. This isn't just a thought, this is actually essential. If we create an accreditation system that is anchored in time, it actually holds back the future. Everything we say we must do forces you from being creative as to how do we do it better. And so our accreditation system has to be better. Let me show you this visually, how I see it. The standard way of thinking about an accreditation system is looking at a distribution of training and saying, let's find the programs, the places where training is the worst, that left side of that bell curve, and let's unaccredit them. Let's get rid of what we call the bad apples. Let's get rid of those people who are not doing right. That doesn't work. That may work at different places and different times, but if you're growing your needs, we can't afford to lose any program. What we need to do is improve and use the accreditation as a tool for improvement. The model that we need to put in place, and that's the one that we're using in the United States through ACGME, is this one, which is, in the simplest way, is shifting the curve. That accreditation needs to move the entire community to a higher state of postgraduate training. And we have to do that by a series of tools that I'll share with you ever so briefly in today's conversation. The last couple points are simple. Accreditation is the starting point for systems improvement, not just for training, but healthcare improvement. The goals of accreditation appear to improve if both the high-stakes judgments are included with formative tools. This is a new concept, and I don't have time to present it today, but the ACGME in the US has said we have to do our formal accreditation, but we're also going to put out tools that give formative feedback, and one of those is called milestones, and some of you may have heard about that. Each year, 130,000 residents are assessed on their milestones. We've been doing that now for several years. And the other is called CLEAR, the Clinical Learning Environment Review Process, CLER. Both of those are part of our accreditation system, but they don't make judgments. They just provide formative feedback because we believe if you give really smart people good information who are highly motivated, in other words, people like you and us and the folks who are trained doctors in the United States, you give them the right information, they're driven enough to take us to places we haven't thought about in a good way. And the last point is the postgraduate medical education has to be fully integrated into the health systems in which they work. We can't, at least in the United States, we have learned we can no longer have medical education kind of existing while healthcare is going on. It has to work together for the best care for the patients. Which brings me back, I think, to that picture I started with, and a reminder that that's the direction we have to go. So I leave you with the thought that I opened with, which is it's about the patient, and it's about training that next generation. Thank you so much for the good work you do every day in both of these things.
شكرا للأستاذ الدكتور كيفن ويس وندعو رؤساء الجلسة لمناقشة الجلسة. Thanks, Professor Kevin Wiss. We're kindly asking the chairpersons to discuss the session.
Thanks very much, Kevin, for this very comprehensive speech. So we have maybe another few minutes, 3 to 5 minutes for questions. So anybody who has a question, please raise your hand. Seems clear lecture. Yes. Dr. Khoja, huh?
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Wiss, for this informative and excellent conducted lecture. If you don't mind, could you elaborate more about the new idea or theme about the SLER that you mentioned in your talk? The CLEAR.
I'm having the same challenge my colleagues did. Up here, it's very hard to hear the question. So could you possibly repeat the question?
Can you repeat the question, Dr. Khoja?
Yeah, during your last slide, you mentioned that you don't have time to elaborate more about CLER. So could you please elaborate more about this method, please, or this thought?
The CLEAR program. Okay, I heard the last slide part. So and I thank you for that because the CLEAR program is very near and dear to me personally because that was one of the reasons I moved into postgraduate medical education. Because I'm not a medical educator, what I saw in the potential for going into an organization and providing a learning tool for them was great. And it was great to know that ACGME was interested in doing that work. What we do with the CLEAR program is we say, in order to stay accredited, you must have a visit that's outside of accreditation. That's important. It's outside of accreditation. And that visit must start with the director of the health system and the director of graduate medical education. And then we go and we do a series of conversations with those in faculty and program directors and residents. And then we meet with the head of quality and safety. And then we walk the units and meet with the nursing staff, the radiology technicians, the pathology technicians, the preoperative, the postoperative areas, and we talk about what it is that this environment looks like. And we do that in 6 areas: safety, quality, professionalism, beginning to see the competencies that we have in the United States. But we also do things in well-being. Is this a place where they support the well-being of the professionals? And we do this also in the area of transitions of care. How well do they take care of patients moving in and out of the system? These were thought to be very important areas. We are going to begin, and we're going to announce it officially in just about a week, talk about the care team and how well the care team is working together. Once we do these visits, which are 2 to 3 days, we bring anywhere from 2 to 5 site visitors. We write a report, but first, before we leave, we talk to the head of the health system and the head of GME in a room with their other executive leadership and say, this is what we saw. And what we say in this is what we saw is, we're not going to tell you how to fix or what to choose. You're smart enough to know that. But we will be back in 2 years to see what's up. And when we come back in 2 years and we've now done our second round, we say, we're now back. We're going to do the same event. We're going to ask you what you've done, but we're not going to provide citations. We're not going to, in any which way, interfere with your accreditation, but we're all going to ask you to be quite frank with us what you've done, and we're going to talk to people the same way we did the last time and write a report that you're going to now expected to share with your governance. And now we're on our third visit, and we're now meeting the CEOs, the chief executive officers of these health systems, and they're saying, we're glad you've come. The information that you've given us has led us to change things we didn't know we needed to change. And we've talked to the leadership in graduate medical education, and they're saying, we're now having new conversations with our clinical leadership because it's helping us better understand how we can work together. And we're seeing, and I'm foreshadowing what we'll be talking about at our big meeting in about 10 days, patient safety engagement with the residents is increasing. Quality improvement work with the residents is increasing. The way that nurses and the residents are engaging in how well they're supervised is changing. The conversation on what's a good handoff of care is changing. Now, we can't do a cause-effect because we're not a big research experiment, but we can say that they're moving in the right path together, and what we hear from the folks who are visiting with is they're saying that there's a cause-effect, and we're very pleased to see that. The CLEAR program in its next cycle will be going, I think we're in about 8 weeks, we start our first protocol where we're going into the operating rooms themselves during a visit. And we're going to be watching how residents are engaged and the environment of how residents are engaged when patients are operated on. And we're also going to start talking to patients about how they see the environment in which these residents. So it's a pretty exciting project, and we really enjoy it in the U.S. And it is part of this formative feedback that's attached to the accreditation system that's giving us at ACGME new insights of how we can be a better accreditor.
Great, thank you very much, Kevin. I think that's enough because the time is over now. So thank you for your attendance, and we'll see you in the workshop. Thank you very much.
انتهت الجلسة الثالثة وندعو سعادة الأستاذ الدكتور أيمن عبدو للتكريم. The third session was finished now. Dr. Ayman Abdu. Now the Professor Ayman Abdu will do the honor.
ما أظن في session. It's not a session. It's just a very short thank you. I would like to appreciate all the speakers for a very exciting morning. I learned so much from the different flavors in discussion, and I hope the quality of the speakers continue to be the same. I would like this moment to acknowledge and thank the hosts of this event, Princess Noura University. They've been the first to jump on the opportunity and put their hand forward and shake our hands to do this event with them. فشكرا جزيلا للجامعة وللمستشفى، وبس تعبيرا عن شكرا لكم حبيت أن بس نكرمكم. الحقيقة صعب علي جدا إنه نعقد مؤتمر للاعتماد من غير ما يعني نشكر شخص في هذا المجال وبذر بذرة كبيرة فيه. I'm going to switch to English because it's very painful for me to speak in Arabic and see you looking at me. We would like now to honor a very, very special friend and member of the Saudi Commission who has actually implanted the seeds of accreditation. دكتور محمد السلطان أخونا ونائب الأمين العام. He will be remembered for a couple of things. Not the bad things that you all know about. I'm talking about the good things. The good things. In accreditation, I think the first step that was very critical is isolating the accreditation out of the training process and giving it its due importance administratively. I think that was a very critical point to make sure that the conflict of interest is avoided and that accreditation is done in a very unbiased way. That was critical governance point. Second was creating of the standards of 80 programs. You all know that how difficult and complicated and challenging that is. These are programs that are general. These are programs that are subspecialized. These are programs that not only medicine and surgery, including nursing, including now the efforts of all the scientific committees, Majalis al-Ilmiya, Lijan are all very well recognized. But it definitely needed a leader to push and sometimes we're a little bit more than pushing, some biting as well. But I think that was very well appreciated. The third one was creating the Central Accreditation Committee. I think to have an owner for accreditation was so critical in pushing this field to the front. And I think the fourth thing that I can say is training the accreditors. There were more than 250 accreditors who were trained, and I would like to thank the great support of the Royal College in doing that. So I think these four critical steps, among others, really deserve appreciation and thank you. And I'm very happy to see the presentation of Dr. Hussein under the leadership of Dr. Hosawi, that we're going to keep moving further because we're still having a lot of gaps. But I think a thank is due. أسأل الله عز وجل أن يكتب لك الأجر ويوفقك ويجزاك خير عن كلنا.
If you allow me, I would like to speak in Arabic because I have something very special for يعني الواحد الحقيقة أنا أعجز عن شكر زملائي وإخواني ويعني أخلاء الروح في الهيئة بهذا التقدير بقدر ما يكون الإنسان معجب ما شاء الله بالتنظيم والعمل المتقن والرائع جدا جدا والنقلة النوعية اللي يراها اليوم بالاعتماد إلا أن يعني من لا يشكر الله لا يشكر الناس. فريق الاعتماد هو الفريق الذهبي الموجود في الهيئة، يعني يرضى من يرضى ويغضب من يغضب. المجموعة يعني المغلق عليها في ذاك الصندوق من دون نوافذ حقيقة يؤدون عمل أسأل الله سبحانه وتعالى أن لا يحرمهم أجره وأجر كل مستفيد من خدمة الاعتماد في أماكن أخرى. فريق الاعتماد على مستوى المستشارين أعضاء اللجنة المركزية للاعتماد والفريق الأول اللي قبل الأسلوب سميها يسمونه الإخوان الأسلوب السلطاني يمكنه الأسلوب الدكتاتوري في بعض يعني اتجاهات الاعتماد قبل هذا وتبناه واليوم الحمد لله بدينا نرى شيء من نتائجه. شكر خاص جدا للجنة ما كانت تعرف أصلا واحتمال أن حتى الآن تعمل يعني في الظل. الدكتور سلطان العنزي لجنة اعتماد التقارير، الدكتور إبراهيم عسيري، الدكتور حسن الذيبي، الدكتور سليمان القويفلي، الدكتور خالد الفوزان. المجموعة هذه حقيقة يعني يكفيهم أنهم صبروا علي مدة سنة كاملة. أجيبهم كل أسبوع عشرات التقارير وإن لم يكن مئات التقارير. رفضوا لي طلبات كثيرة كنت أحاول يعني أمرر عليهم بعض الأمور إلا أنهم يعني أحسبهم الله حسيبهم أنه كانوا يراعون ما تحتاجه يعني ما يحتاجه البلد وتحتاجه العملية التعليمية، بالإضافة إلى الإكسترا وورك اللي كانوا يبذلون حتى يؤدون يعني بعض المهام. شكرا لكم جميعا. أشكر أخي يعني الحقيقة الدكتور عبد الرحمن هوساوي على ما شاء الله النقلة النوعية بعمل منظم مقنن، فعلا يرى الإنسان جودة العمل. أسأل الله سبحانه وتعالى أن يعني يجزيهم خير الجزاء، وأنا أشكر يعني اللفتة الكريمة على الشكر والتقدير، لكن جزاكم الله خير. الشكر للجميع، وحقيقة التقدير لكل واحد عمل بتلك الفترة وما زال يعمل أو عمل وترك العمل وانتقل إلى مكان آخر. شكرا جزيلا.
Small housekeeping issues. We're going to continue the program. However, there are a few changes, slight changes for the program. We're going to have a 5-minute break, so we'll allow our colleagues to move from this room to the workshop room, the surveyor workshop. As you know, the workshop is going to start at 11. We have 2 workshops for the surveyors, 2 rooms. And the program will continue after 5 minutes. So we're going to have the second session with Dr. Susan at 11, Susan Day at 11:05, inshallah.
And another 5 minutes for me, so it will be 10 minutes, because by the time you go out and you come back, it doesn't really, it's not worth it. We'll make it 10 minutes, and I will hopefully escape the punishment.
Okay, طيب, inshallah. So 10-minute break, and then after that you'll go to the surveyor workshop, those who are registered, and the rest of the group will be here for the second session. Thank you.